Zyler adjusted the recording equipment with practiced precision, though his four-fingered hands trembled slightly. Today's interview could make or break his career. For 30 cycles, he had built his reputation as Xylosi's premier mythbuster and investigative historian, revealing the truth behind the galaxy's most persistent legends. But this story, this absurd, impossible tale, threatened to either crown his legacy or destroy his credibility entirely. The subject of his investigation, the Cathar. Merely uttering their name in certain sectors could silence a crowded spaceport. Genetically modified apex predators created for warfare centuries ago, they had survived their master's extinction to become the most feared beings in the known galaxy. Standing 3 meters tall, with reinforced exoskeletons that could deflect small arms fire, retractable bone blades capable of slicing through reinforced bulkheads, and neural processing that made them tactical savants, they were biological perfection weaponized. Most systems simply surrendered resource-rich territories rather than face them in combat. The few who resisted rarely lived to regret it, which made the rumors all the more preposterous. For the past 6 standard months, Zyler had been tracking whispers of an incident involving a small human diplomatic delegation that had not only survived an encounter with the Cathar, but had somehow humiliated them. More specifically, the rumors centered around a single slap. One human hand against the face of the galaxy's apex predator, and somehow the human had walked away. Complete propaganda. His editor had laughed when Zyler proposed the investigation. The humans are relatively new to interstellar politics. They're spreading tall tales to compensate for their physical weaknesses. No story here. But Zyler couldn't let it go. The sheer absurdity of it haunted him. If it were fabricated propaganda, why this specific story? Why not craft something more believable? And why were so many non-humans repeating it? Initial research had revealed little. Official records mentioned only a minor diplomatic incident during trade negotiations at Neutral Station 7, quickly classified. Zyler had spent weeks tracking down leads, bribing information brokers, and searching for witnesses, all without success. Then, 3 cycles ago, a breakthrough. He located a low-ranking logistics officer who had been aboard the transport vessel that carried the human delegation. Now retired and living in seclusion on a remote agricultural world, the officer had finally agreed to speak. "I didn't see everything," the aging Vespidian said, mandibles clicking nervously as he glanced around his modest dwelling. "I was stationed in the docking bay when they returned, but I saw enough." The officer described the palpable tension when the war chief Cathar had boarded their vessel for what was termed a mandatory inspection, a thinly veiled show of force. Everyone was terrified. Even the captain could barely speak. "We all expected to die that day. And the humans?" Zyler prompted. "Calm. Unnaturally calm. Especially the young one, the cultural liaison. Vance was his name. Elias Vance. He seemed almost bored." The Vespidian's compound eyes flickered. When they returned, the war chief left first. He moved differently, subdued. The crew was whispering, but no one dared ask questions. The incident was classified immediately. We were ordered never to speak of it. But something happened. The young human, Vance, I overheard him speaking to his ambassador as they disembarked. She asked if he understood what he had done. He said, "It's just animal behavior, Ambassador. Nothing mysterious about it." Those were his exact words. The Vespidian leaned forward. 2 days later, the Cathar withdrew territorial claims on 3 border systems without explanation. Whatever that human did, it changed something. Now, sitting in his temporary accommodations on Neutral Station 7, Zyler prepared to interview another witness, a maintenance worker who had been present during the actual encounter. His investigation had led him back to where it all began. The station's recycled air carried the mingled scents of a dozen species and twice as many cuisines. Holographic advertisements flickered, promising everything from mood-altering substances to spiritual enlightenment. Station 7 was a crossroads, neutral territory where species who might otherwise be at war could conduct business without official repercussions. 5 cycles ago, It had also been the site of what might be the most unlikely diplomatic incident in galactic history. The humans were an oddity, explained Trellick, the Goran maintenance supervisor who had agreed to meet him. Her gelatinous form shimmered with nervous bioluminescence as she recounted the events. They had only achieved FTL travel a few decades prior, yet they moved through the station with remarkable confidence. Particularly, Ambassador Rostova, tall for a human, silver-haired, with the bearing of one accustomed to command. Zyler recorded everything as Trellick described the human delegation. 6 individuals led by Ambassador Eva Rostova, seeking trading rights for rare minerals found in human-controlled space. Most of the delegation consisted of security personnel and trade specialists, but one stood apart, Elias Vance, listed as a cultural liaison and diplomatic aide. According to Trellick, Vance was quiet, unassuming, often seen reading during breaks in negotiations. He asked me questions about station maintenance, Trellick recalled. Odd questions for a diplomat. About ventilation systems, about how different species responded to confined spaces. I thought he was assessing security vulnerabilities, but he seemed genuinely interested in how we accommodated biological diversity. The negotiations had been proceeding smoothly until the unexpected arrival of War Chief Krogan and his entourage of Cathar warriors. Their massive assault craft docked without authorization, a blatant violation of station protocols, but no one dare refuse them entry. They entered the main concourse during peak cycle, Trellick said, her outer membrane pulsing with the memory. 3 full-grown Cathar warriors in battle armor, with Krogan at their center. You've never seen a Cathar in person, have you? Zyler shook his head. Consider yourself fortunate. Krogan stood nearly 4 meters tall, his exoskeleton enhanced with cybernetic weaponry. His faceplate, that distinctive Cathar feature, was scarred from countless battles, and his eyes, those compound eyes that somehow still convey emotion. They radiated pure contempt. The station's security forces, a mixed-species contingent, had immediately withdrawn to defensive positions, knowing intervention would mean certain death. The Cathar moved through the concourse, sentient beings of all species scrambling to clear their path. They headed directly for the negotiation chambers, Trellick continued, as if they knew exactly where the humans would be. Later, we suspected information leaks, but at the time, it seemed like predatory instinct. They can sense fear, you know? And humans, with their soft exteriors and lack of natural defenses, they must have seemed like perfect prey. Within the negotiations chamber, Ambassador Rostova had been in mid-discussion with hegemony trade representatives when the doors slid open. Witnesses described how conversation died instantly. The Cathar entourage entered, Krogan's massive form dominating the space, his armor scraping the ceiling. Humans, Krogan had announced, his translator rendering the complex clicks and growls of Cathar speech into standard galactic. We have heard of your species. So new, so fragile. Ambassador Rostova, with remarkable composure, had risen to her feet. War Chief Krogan, this is an unexpected honor. The United Earth Diplomatic Corps welcomes the opportunity to establish relations with the Cathar Dominion. Witnesses reported that Krogan's response was a sound that might have been laughter, a rasping, chitinous noise that raised primal fear responses in most beings present. Relations? You misunderstand your position in the galactic hierarchy, human. We do not establish relations. We take what we want. We dominate what we permit to live. The Cathar warriors had spread out, effectively surrounding the human delegation. The other negotiating parties, representatives from the hegemony, the collective, and various independent worlds, had retreated to the walls, none willing to be caught in whatever was about to unfold. Ambassador Rostova remained standing, Trellick recounted. She didn't show fear, which seemed to intrigue Krogan. He approached her directly, violating all diplomatic protocols, entering her personal space. He lowered his massive head until his faceplate was centimeters from hers. I could smell the pheromones his species releases, a predatory musk designed to paralyze prey with terror. What happened next had become the heart of the rumors that had brought Zyler to Station 7. Krogan extended one bladed limb toward the ambassador's credentials, the diplomatic seal and data tablet she wore on a chain. I believe he intended to take it to demonstrate his dominance. A simple show of power. Standard Cthar behavior. Trellick's form shuddered at the memory. That's when the quiet one, Vance, stepped between them. According to multiple witnesses, Elias Vance, the unassuming cultural liaison who had spent most negotiations quietly observing, moved with unexpected grace and speed. He positioned himself between Ambassador Rostova and the towering Cthar warlord. There was no hesitation, Trellick said. No apparent fear. He looked up at Krogan, this human barely reaching the Cthar's thorax, and without warning, delivered an open-handed slap directly to Krogan's armored faceplate. The sound, witnesses agreed, echoed throughout the chamber, a sharp crack that seemed to freeze time itself. We all expected immediate death. For Vance, for all humans present, possibly for everyone in the chamber. Cthar are known to respond to even minor provocations with lethal force. And this was beyond provocation. It was suicidal madness. But death didn't come. Krogan froze. Trellick's bioluminescence flickered rapidly as she described the impossible. His limbs went rigid. Those predatory eyes widened. There was confusion there, something none of us had ever seen in a Cthar. Vance maintained eye contact, unwavering, direct, and said a single word in basic galactic, enough. The standoff lasted several seconds that felt like hours to those present. Then, witnessed by representatives from 12 spacefaring species, the unthinkable happened. Krogan lowered his bladed limb and took a step backward. His warriors seemed as shocked as the rest of us, Trellick said. There was visible conflict in their postures, instinct battling with something none of us understood. Without another word, Krogan turned and left the chamber. His entourage followed, equally silent. Their craft departed the station within 20 minutes. The aftermath was immediate and chaotic. Station security quarantined the negotiation chamber. The human delegation was sequestered for questioning. Diplomatic channels buzzed with conflicting reports. When asked for an explanation, Trellick concluded, Vance reportedly offered none beyond stating that the war chief had been impolite. Ambassador Rostova appeared as mystified as anyone. Whatever Vance had done, it seemed it hadn't been part of their diplomatic strategy. The incident was quickly classified. Official records were sanitized. Witnesses were encouraged to forget what they had seen. But rumors persisted, growing with each retelling, spreading through trading posts and spaceports across the galaxy. A human had slapped a Cthar war chief and lived. Most dismissed it as impossible fantasy. Xyler himself might have, had he not now collected too many consistent accounts from too many reliable sources. Back in his temporary quarters, Xyler reviewed his notes, struggling to reconcile what he had learned with known Cthar biology and behavior patterns. Everything he knew about the species contradicted what had apparently transpired. Cthar did not back down from challenges. Their neural pathways were specifically engineered to respond to any threat with overwhelming force. Their social hierarchy was maintained through constant displays of dominance and occasional lethal combat. A physical challenge from a species they outmassed by hundreds of kilograms, one possessing no natural weapons or defenses, should have triggered immediate, lethal retaliation. Not retreat. Never retreat. Using connections that would have cost him his journalistic credentials had they been discovered, Xyler accessed restricted xenopsychology databases. He spent days researching human evolutionary history, particularly their development alongside terrestrial predator species. What he found fascinated him. Unlike most sentient species who had evolved either as apex predators themselves or as prey species with specific defense mechanisms, humans occupied an unusual middle ground. They had evolved alongside dangerous predators without overwhelming physical advantages, no venomous appendages, limited natural armor, modest speed and strength. Yet somehow, they had not only survived but had come to dominate their world. More intriguingly, humans had a unique history of domesticating predator species. Wolves transformed into canine companions. Large felines kept as status symbols, massive equines ridden for transportation. They had developed methods of asserting dominance not through overwhelming force, but through behavioral conditioning and interspecies communication pathways. Fascinating, Zeiler muttered, reviewing data on human neural structures specifically developed for reading subtle body language cues across species. These same pathways allowed them to communicate complex intentions through posture, eye contact, and vocal tonality, skills that had served them well in their primitive hunter-gatherer phase and apparently remained ingrained. After exhausting the scientific resources, Zeiler decided he needed direct human perspective. Through careful networking, he arranged a brief, unofficial interview with the now-retired Ambassador Rostova, living on a human colony world. Yes, it happened, the elderly human confirmed during their secure communication. Age had bent her tall frame, but her eyes remained sharp and evaluating, though I've never fully understood how or why it worked. The official record states there was a minor misunderstanding quickly resolved through diplomatic channels. But that's not what happened, Zeiler pressed. Ambassador Rostova's lined face creased further with a smile. Young Vance saved all our lives. That day, though I'm still not entirely sure how. He had an unusual background before joining the diplomatic corps, animal behavior studies, particularly with dangerous predator species. During his briefing interview, he mentioned that many intelligent species retain primitive behavioral patterns beneath their technological advancements. We thought it an interesting academic perspective, not a practical diplomatic skill. Did he explain his actions afterward? He said something about interrupting a threat display pattern with an unexpected dominance assertion, that Krogan was following an instinctual behavior script, and he simply changed the script. She shook her head. Elias had a strange empathy for creatures most humans would consider monsters. He could read them, somehow. Where is Vance now? Zeiler asked. He left diplomatic service shortly after the incident. Official reason, stress. Last I heard, he was running some sort of wildlife preserve and research station on the frontier. He never seemed comfortable with attention. This final revelation provided the missing piece Zeiler needed. After completing his interview with Ambassador Rostova, he plotted a course to the remote system where Elias Vance had established his sanctuary. The journey took weeks, the final approach requiring passage through an asteroid field that seemed designed to discourage casual visitors. When Zeiler's small craft finally emerged into clear space, he found himself approaching a modest space station orbiting a terraformed moon. The station's architecture was unusual, a central hub surrounded by biospheres of various environments, each containing its own atmosphere and ecosystem. After docking, Zeiler was greeted not by Vance, but by an automated system that guided him through decontamination procedures before leading him to his central observation area. The space overlooked one of the larger habitats, a carefully reconstructed rainforest environment where several species Zeiler recognized as endangered were visible among the foliage. Sorry to keep you waiting, a voice said from behind him. We had a medical situation with one of the Cardassian razor beasts. Difficult birth. Zeiler turned to find himself facing an older human male. Elias Vance had aged since the diplomatic incident, gray streaking his once dark hair, lines etched around his eyes, but there was a calm steadiness to him that matched descriptions from witnesses. He wore simple, practical clothing suited to physical work, and his hands showed the calluses of someone who didn't rely on automation for difficult tasks. You're the journalist, Vance stated. Not a question. The one asking about Krogan. Zeiler, Historical Investigative Division, Xylosi Central News Network. Zeiler introduced himself, extending his documentation. Thank you for agreeing to speak with me. Vance didn't take the offered credentials. Instead, he moved to the observation window, attention seemingly caught by movement in the habitat below. I didn't agree to anything. Your message said you were coming. I simply didn't refuse. Yet you're here. A slight smile. So I am. Vance gestured toward the habitat. See the crested theropod moving through the underbrush? Nearly extinct. Planetary mining operation destroyed 90% of their natural habitat. They're apex predators, incredibly intelligent, remarkably adaptive. The corporation that was destroying their world described them as impossible to relocate and too dangerous to preserve. Xyler observed the creature, a bipedal hunter with iridescent scales and a lethal-looking claw structure. They appear formidable. They are. They could disembowel either of us with minimal effort. Vance's tone held something like affection. And yet, here they are, thriving, cooperative with our research teams, even allowing veterinary intervention when necessary. Ow! Understanding. Vance turned from the window to face Xyler directly. Not control, not domination. Understanding. He sighed. You didn't come all this way to discuss wildlife conservation. You want to know about Krogan. I've heard dozens of accounts of what happened at Station 7, Xyler said, but none explain why it worked. By all logic, by everything known about Cthar physiology and psychology, you should have been killed instantly. Vance was silent for a long moment. Then, have you ever worked with dangerous animals, Xyler? I'm a journalist. That's not an answer. No, Xyler admitted. My species tends to avoid situations requiring direct confrontation with predators. Sensible. Vance nodded. Come with me. He led Xyler through a series of corridors to a smaller habitat. Inside, a creature Xyler recognized as a Jovian spine wolf paced restlessly. The species was known for its territorial aggression and had been responsible for numerous colonist deaths on frontier worlds. This one was captured by poachers, Vance explained. Intended for illegal combat sports. When we rescued him, he was so aggressive we couldn't approach within 5 meters without triggering an attack response. He entered a code on a panel, and a section of the habitat wall became transparent, converting from one-way observation glass to a clear barrier. The spine wolf immediately noticed them and approached, muscles tensing beneath its armored hide. Watch, Vance said quietly. As the creature reached the barrier, it raised its ridged spine, a prelude to attack posture. Vance didn't retreat. Instead, he made direct eye contact with the creature and raised his hand sharply. Not a threatening gesture, but a clear, deliberate movement. The spine wolf froze. Good, Vance said, his voice carrying a specific tone, firm but not aggressive. The creature's spine slowly lowered. It maintained eye contact for several seconds before turning away, resuming its pacing with noticeably less agitation. What did you do? Xyler asked. Interrupted a behavioral pattern, Vance explained. Predators operate on instinctual scripts. When they display aggression, they expect either submission or counteraggression, fight or flight. When you provide neither, when you respond with calm assertiveness instead, it creates cognitive dissonance. It interrupts their behavioral programming. And this is what you did with Krogan? You interrupted his programming. Vance smiled slightly. The Cthar are not simple animals. They're highly intelligent, technologically advanced beings. But like all species, they retain evolutionary behavioral patterns beneath their civilization. Krogan was engaging in classic predator intimidation behavior with Ambassador Rostova. The territorial advance, the invasion of personal space, the display of weaponry. These are universal predator signals designed to force submission. So you challenged him? With a slap? I didn't challenge him. That would have triggered combat response. I didn't submit. That would have reinforced his dominance display. I interrupted his behavioral script with a sharp, unexpected stimulus combined with specific body language and vocal tonality that, in his evolutionary psychology, signaled something his conscious mind couldn't process, but his instincts recognized. Xyler struggled to comprehend. You're saying you train him? Like an animal? No. Vance's voice sharpened. I communicated with him on a level below conscious thought. The slap itself was largely irrelevant. It was the totality of the communication. The direct eye contact, the specific stance, the vocal tone when I said enough. These elements together triggered ancient neural pathways the Cthar retained from their pre-modification ancestry. And this made him back down? The most feared warrior species in the galaxy. It created momentary confusion, a short circuit between his instinctual responses and his conscious mind. In that moment of hesitation, his behavioral script was broken. He could have recovered, of course, could have shifted to attack mode. But the interruption was so unexpected, so outside his experience, that his default was to withdraw and reassess. Vance led Zyler back toward the central hub. After the incident, I was asked to consult on a classified xenobiological study. We discovered the Cthar, despite their genetic modifications for warfare, retain deep pack hierarchy instincts. Their entire social structure is built around dominance displays and ritualized challenges. But crucially, these challenges follow specific patterns that evolved to minimize actual physical conflict within their species. You're saying you use their own instincts against them, not against them. I communicated in a language their instincts understood, bypassing their conscious hostility. Vance's expression became distant. Humans have a unique history among spacefaring species. We evolved alongside predators we couldn't outfight, developing communication skills as a survival mechanism. We learned to domesticate wolves, pack hunters similar in social structure to the Cthar's evolutionary ancestors. We developed neural pathways specifically for interspecies communication and behavioral assertion based on understanding rather than raw strength. Zyler's recording equipment captured everything as they walked, his mind racing with implications. So the rumors were true, but misunderstood. It wasn't the physical slap that mattered. It was what the slap represented in Cthar instinctual psychology. Vance finished. A dominance assertion that bypassed conscious thought. For a crucial moment, Krogan's instincts recognized something his modified mind couldn't process, an alpha assertion he was evolutionarily programmed to respect. Before Zyler could ask further questions, an alarm sounded. Vance checked a communication device on his wrist, his expression shifting to concern. We have an unregistered vessel approaching. Unusual configuration. He showed Zyler the display. The ship's silhouette was instantly recognizable, the distinctive predatory lines of a Cthar assault craft. We need to evacuate, Zyler said, fear flooding his system. If they've discovered, I'm investigating the incident. No. Vance's voice was calm, assured. They're not here for you. How can you know that? Because they've been here before. The security protocols activated automatically, habitat containment shields engaging to protect the sanctuary's residents. Vance led Zyler to a viewing platform overlooking the landing area. The Cthar vessel set down with precision, its design as much biological as mechanical, reflecting the aesthetic of its creators. When the entry portal opened, a single figure emerged. Even at a distance, the massive form was unmistakable. Krogan himself, war chief of the Cthar Dominion. He comes every standard year, Vance explained quietly. Has done so since about 6 months after our encounter at Station 7. What? Zyler asked, unable to keep the disbelief from his voice. To understand, Vance activated an external communication system and spoke into it. The sanctuary welcomes you. War Chief Krogan. Standard protocols apply. He turned to Zyler. Stay here. Observe if you wish, but do not interfere. Before Zyler could protest, Vance had left the platform. Minutes later, the human appeared in the landing area, walking calmly toward the towering Cthar warrior. From his vantage point, Zyler could see but not hear the exchange. Krogan's posture seemed different from the typical Cthar stance. Less aggressive, more contained. Vance's body language remained open, unafraid. After a brief conversation, they moved toward one of the habitats, Vance leading and Krogan following. Zyler waited, anxiety mounting, until a sanctuary staff member arrived to escort him to a secure observation room. From there, he could see Vance and Krogan standing before the enclosure housing a juvenile Arcturian megaraptor, a species known for its ferocity and near-impossible resistance to domestication. Through a one-way audio system, Zyler could now hear their conversation. Still do not fully comprehend, Krogan was saying, his translator rendering the Cthar speech in a stilted but understandable galactic standard. My mind knows you possess no superior strength, no natural weapons, no technological advantage in that moment. Yet my instinct. He paused, seeming to struggle with the concept. My instinct recognized authority. Not authority, Vance corrected gently. Boundary. There's a difference. Explain. Vance gestured toward the Megaraptor. Watch. He entered a code, and a section of the habitat barrier retracted. The raptor immediately charged toward the opening, only to halt abruptly at the threshold. Vance stood directly in its path, making a short, sharp gesture with his hand. The creature pulled back, its aggression visibly receding. I have not hurt it. I have not threatened it. I have simply established a boundary it recognizes at an instinctual level, Vance explained. This understanding transcends species barriers because certain behavioral patterns are universal among predatory species. You see us as animals to be trained. Krogan's tone carried what might have been offense. No, I see all species, humans included, as beings whose conscious minds rest upon foundations of evolutionary instinct. Understanding those instincts allows for communication beyond words. Krogan was silent for a long moment. Since our encounter, there has been conflict within the Dominion. Some believe we should exterminate humanity as a potential threat. Others, including myself, have argued for reassessment. His massive head turned toward Vance. The slap altered my perception. For the first time in my existence, I questioned the foundations of Cathar superiority. That was never my intent, Vance said. Yet it was the result. Krogan's compound eyes shifted, focusing on something distant. Our species was created for warfare by masters long extinct. We have known no other way. But your actions suggested alternatives exist. Room is the one who remains calm while others panic. In that moment with Krogan, I was neither prey nor rival predator. I was something his instincts couldn't categorize, triggering confusion rather than aggression. And now, these visits from Krogan. He's curious. The incident challenged his worldview. The Cathar have known only dominance through force for their entire existence. The possibility of alternative forms of strength, it's revolutionary for them. Will they change? Xyler asked. Could this alter Cathar behavior galaxy-wide? Vance's expression became guarded. That's not for me to say. Krogan leads only one faction, and behavioral evolution takes time, even with conscious effort. He fixed Xyler with a penetrating gaze. Your article, what will you write? Xyler considered carefully. The truth, as I understand it, that humans, despite their apparent physical vulnerabilities, possess a unique form of strength born from empathy, behavioral understanding, and evolutionary history. That the slap was not merely an insult, but an instinctual dominance assertion that bypassed centuries of Cathar conditioning. He paused. That perhaps there are more forms of power in this galaxy than we have recognized. Vance nodded slowly. The Cathar will not appreciate such revelations. Perhaps not. But neither will they be able to dismiss humans as inconsequential after it's published. And is that a good thing, Xyler? To be perceived as a potential threat by the most dangerous predators in known space. The journalist considered this. Perhaps not a threat, but a species worthy of respect, of consideration. Vance smiled faintly. There may be hope for interspecies understanding yet. As Xyler prepared to depart the sanctuary, making final checks on his recording equipment and notes, he found himself reflecting on the implications of what he had learned. The galaxy had long operated on assumptions about strength and power that were fundamentally limited, focused on physical capacity, technological advancement, numerical advantage. Yet here was evidence of something entirely different, a form of strength rooted in understanding, in communication across biological barriers, in a recognition of shared evolutionary heritage. Humans, dismissed as physically unimpressive newcomers to the galactic stage, possessed a unique power few species had recognized. Their evolutionary development alongside predators had given them insights into behavior patterns that transcended species boundaries. The slap heard across the galaxy wasn't a display of foolish courage or lucky timing. It was an instinctual communication that had momentarily bridged the vast biological divide between two very different sentient species. As his ship broke orbit, Xyler began composing the introduction to what might be the most significant article of his career. He would title it The Power of Understanding. How humans challenge the galaxy's most dangerous predators with a single slap. The truth would challenge everything the galaxy thought it knew about humans and the Kthar alike. It would suggest a future where relations between species might be built on more than just technological parity or military standoff. One where understanding itself might become a form of power. And somewhere on a distant frontier, a human who preferred the company of dangerous creatures to the accolades of his own kind would continue his quiet work, building bridges of understanding with the galaxy's most feared predators, one behavioral pattern at a time.